Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show where we discuss Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we are going to be talking about the newest batch of Warhammer 40k spoilers. They just keep coming, it's never ending. So without further ado, let's get started. And we're starting off with Screamer Killer, a 4 colorless, 1 red creature Tyranids 5/5 with Trample and Bioplasmic Scream, which is whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, Screamer Killer deals 5 damage to any target. This is really sweet in certain decks that are going to be able to play a lot of fatties. It's a classic kind of battle cruiser commander card. I'm really liking this direction. It provides you some burn towards the end of the game. It can also pick off quite a lot of creatures in the format, so this just seems really solid. Next up we have Sporocyst for X colorless, and 1 green creature Tyranid. It's a 0/0, it has Ravenous, which means it enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it, and if it's 5 or greater, you draw a card when it enters. And then it has Defender and Spore Chimney. When Sporocyst enters the battlefield, search your library for up to X basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. So for Ravenous to be on for this card, you'd have to cast it with 11 mana, which probably is something that you're not interested in doing late in the game, since this is just ramping you. That being said, this can provide a lot of ramp and scales quite nicely into the late game. As a 5-drop, you'll be searching up 2 lands. That is actually kind of solid, so not that bad. Next up we have Termagant Swarm, which is X colorless and 1 green. It's a creature Tyranid. It's a 0/0 with Ravenous and Death Frenzy. When Termagant Swarm dies, create a number of 1/1 green Tyranid creature tokens equal to its power. So this is going to be super solid in the Tyranid deck, obviously, and it's going to go well in any Counters Matters deck. Most of these Tyranid cards work well with Counters Matters, and this is no different. This is basically another Chasm Skulker type effect for those decks. Next up is Shadow in the Warp. This is an interesting one with 1 colorless, 1 red and 1 green. It's an enchantment. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. And whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, Shadow in the Warp deals 2 damage to that player. So this is going to be really good in Nixthia of the old ways, obviously. It's going to give you a nice little discount on your first creature each turn, and it's going to hurt your opponents for the first time they cast a non-creature spell, which can definitely add up. It's a pity that it's only the first non-creature they cast every turn, but that's the way modern design is going. Next up we have Turvigon for X colorless, 1 colorless and 1 green. It's a creature Tyranid. It's a 0/0 with Ravenous and Trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green Tyranid creature tokens. So again, another card that's going to be really good in green Counters Matter decks. The fact that this has Trample built in is going to make it a little bit more likely that it connects, and if you manage to cast this for a large enough amount, this can be quite solid. Next up we have the Red Terror for 3 colorless and 1 red, legendary creature Tyranid 4/3, advanced species. Whenever a red source you control deals damage to 1 or more permanents and or players, put a +1/+1 counter on the Red Terror. So this works really well with the commander we talked about in the previous video, the one that deals 2 extra damage whenever you ping something. And this guy can get really huge in the right deck. So any deck that deals multiple instances separately is going to grow this to massive amounts. Doesn't have any evasion or anything, so you're going to have to find a way to make it get through. Maybe Fling would be nice, but seems a pretty solid card. Next up we have Clamavis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. For 4 colorless, 1 green. It's a creature Human Tyranid Artificer 3/3. Seriously, the names and the creature types in this set, we should get an award for reading all of these correctly. And it says Proclamator Hailer, which is each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on it. So another +1/+1 Counters Matter card. This is essentially doubling the power and toughness of your +1/+1 counter creatures without exactly saying so. And obviously if you remove it from the board, you can get blown out. Do be careful with this, but it packs a lot of power, really. Next up we have Trigon Prime for 2 colorless, 1 green and 1 blue. It's a creature Tyranid 4/4 with Subterranean Assault. Whenever Trigon Prime attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it and a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 other target attacking creature. That creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is pretty nice for spreading counters around if you need them in your Counters Matter decks. It's going to grow pretty quickly, and making something unblockable is really clutch in those decks because they often do have trouble pushing damage through. So for example, that red creature we just saw could be really good once it's unblockable. Something like Chasm Skulker, which we talked about earlier, which can get huge but doesn't have any evasion, can be really sweet. Something like Cold-Eyed Selkie is also amazing with this. So this kind of feels like it's going to slot into more decks than just the Tyranid one. Next up is Tyranid Invasion. It's 3 colorless and 1 green. It's a sorcery. Create a number of 3/3 green Tyranid warrior tokens with trample equal to the number of opponents you have. have. Just a fine card in a Tyranid deck, but it won't see play anywhere else. Next up is Aberrant, X colorless, 1 colorless and 1 green creature, Tyranid mutant. It's a 0/0 with Ravenous, and it has Trample and Heavy Power Hammer. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. That's pretty nice as well. The fact that it has Trample means it's very likely to get through. I'm a bit confused by the fact that a lot of the Tyranids look kind of humanoid, but I didn't remember them being that humanoid from when I used to play Warhammer 40k. That being said, things might have changed. Next up we have Acolyte Hybrid, 2 colorless and 1 red. It's a creature Tyranid human, 2/2. It has Heavy Rock Cutter. Whenever Acolyte Hybrid attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If an artifact is destroyed this way, its controller draws a card. This one's a little bit iffy. It's nice that you can remove problematic artifacts, but giving them a card draw is not ideal. I actually kind of like this more in a way to get some card draw in red for yourself. If you target your own treasure tokens or things that are a little bit more useless on your side of the board, then you can just draw some cards off of it, which seems pretty good. Next up we have Tyranid Prime for 1 colorless, 1 green and 1 blue. It has Evolve, which means when a creature with higher power or toughness comes into play, it's going to get a +1/+1 counter on it. And it also gives all your other creatures Evolve. I really like this one, and this would go straight into my Vorel of the Hullclade deck. It's going to mean your creatures get counters very easily because it's so common for you to have things with different toughness and power in your deck. So it just seems very likely that you're always going to get at least 1 +1/+1 counter off of pretty much anything you cast when this is in play. This is really solid, and I feel like it's going to see play in more than just the Tyranid decks. Next up we have Tyrant Guard for X colorless, 2 colorless and 1 green. It's a creature Tyranid 3/3 with Ravenous, and it has Shield Wall, which is sacrifice Tyrant Guard. Creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Very good for counters meta decks. You often run into a situation where you have a board that's winning very incrementally. You can't really kind of combo off that often with these kind of counters matters creature based decks. This just gives you great protection against board wipes. So I think this is really solid. It's also great against spot removal if they try to disrupt a combo piece. So yeah, I think this is fantastic. And again, it's going straight into my Vorel deck. I don't know what I'm going to cut because there's so many cards from this set that fit there. Next up is Venom Thrope for 1 colorless, 1 green and 1 blue. It's a creature Tyranid 2/2 with flying, death touch and hexproof. Not much to say here. This is super annoying. It's almost always going to trade for the best thing on the board that attacks you, and it's probably going to stop people from attacking you quite a lot, and it's very difficult to remove. Kind of cool. Next up is Gene Stealer Locust for 3 colorless and 1 blue. It's a creature Tyranid human 3/3, and it has Neurotromal Rod. Whenever a creature attacks you, it gets -1, -0 until end of turn, and whenever a creature attacks one of your opponents, it gets +0/+1 until end of turn. So this is encouraging people to attack your opponents and not you. It'll probably do that job pretty well. Kind of nice political card to get the attention away from you. Although that being said, people are probably going to want to remove this because it's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, so be warned if you play it. And finally we have Bone Sabers, 2 colorless and 1 green, and artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature attacks, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it and equip 3 colorless. That's a lot of counters. I mean, the fact that it's a permanent buff is kind of sweet. If you have the mana to move this around each turn and give different things +4/+4 permanently, that can be a really solid card. It also works really well with stuff that does things when counters get put on it, such as Fathom Mage, which is going to draw 4 cards when it attacks with this. That seems really sweet, and there's a bunch of cards that interact with it like that. So look forward to seeing what happens with this. So there you have it. That's our 3rd batch of Warhammer 40k spoilers done. What do you think about this batch of cards? Is there anything that has caught your eye? Let me know in the comments below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I'm growing right now. And until next time, take care.